Hey YouTube, Ryan Knight here. As you can probably tell from the title of this video, this is going to be more of a pathology report on a situation that has been brought to my attention. Now, the situation that I'm talking about is how in a couple of European countries, I know at least Germany, but I wouldn't be surprised if this either is already going on in other EU countries, or if it starts up pretty soon in other EU countries. It's basically, where the local men sit there, intervene in a rape or attempted rape of one of the local women by, refugees, or, just anyone, quote unquote, different, and what ends up happening? Oh, well, the guys who intervened in the crime, who physically stopped it, well, they end up getting charged with hate crimes, assault, so on and so forth. Now, I want to look at the pathology behind that line of thinking and how it pertains to the local governments, the local police, which, I'm sorry, guys, to police officers out there, you're part of the government. You're, at that point, you are part of the government. Whether it be you being subcontracted or whatever, you're still part of it. So, sorry, can't separate you. But the pathology behind this, let's go ahead and take a look at it. Where did this type of mentality start? If you think that it's a recent thing, you'd be very, very wrong. Now, we already know that there have been groups in our countries, including the US, but in all throughout Western civilization, that have absolutely hated any level of capitalism or independence and so on and so forth. Typically, these groups are either the people who have the lowest level of education, and I'm not saying that they're idiots, I'm saying that they have a low level of education. There is a difference. Because honestly, our greatest concentration of idiots at this point are in college. But let's go ahead and just say it. The other part of that problem is with people who find themselves very well off. Kind of running the show, the ones that are in charge. People involved in government. Now, what is the wet dream of any government? Think about it. Absolute 150% dependence on the government by each individual citizen, and as all citizens as a whole. So, how do you achieve that? Because as long as people can at least have the semblance of doing what they want, they're not going to be 100% dependent on you, and they're not going to feel like they're 100% dependent on you. Well, you take their ability to protect themselves away. This means that using Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I've covered this in previous videos, so maybe you want to go back and watch my other videos. But as far as Maslow's hierarchy of needs, safety is actually very low on that pyramid. So if you are unable to make yourself feel safe, if you are unable to attain it yourself, and you are dependent on the government to do that, then the vast majority of your hierarchy of needs is dependent on the government, for the most part, enslaving you at that point. Welcome to human nature. A lot of people think that the government's incompetent, incapable, and so on and so forth. No, they're just fucking brilliant. They're purposely being ineffective at this point. And they've been doing this for quite a while. I can only speak as far as the US government is concerned, but the more I look into foreign governments, their histories, their patterns of action, they're not any different than the US. It's just they might be a little bit more aggressive about attacking that pyramid. But how do you go ahead and make it so people can't make themselves feel safe? Make it illegal for them to protect themselves. Make it a punishable offense. Make them rely on the police. Make them rely on law enforcement. That is how you get people to basically voluntarily become sheep. They'll give up more and more freedoms for more and more protections. So at this point, freedom is the currency. And just like any corporation or any business, they don't want some of the currency. They want all of it. And anyone who says that a government is not a business or a corporation really needs to get their head checked. They're ran like a business. They're ran like a corporation. They have the same hierarchical structures, typically. The U.S. is the one that's the most inefficient as far as it being ran that way, but it still functions in that way. Now, the truly scary part of it is people fall for it. And I'm not one of those people that says there should never be any government whatsoever. I am not saying that. I'm not that crazy. When people say, you know, oh, we shouldn't have a government, people should just do what they want, that doesn't work out too well. And especially with the people who are saying this, oh, good Lord, they'd be the first ones dead. So let's just be honest here. But as far as this situation and how all this connects, it's actually the start. Basically what it is at this point, they're choosing a group to go ahead and later on hang, but they're using them as useful idiots. But in a different way than what you usually hear the term used to describe. They're sitting there and conferring special privileges, special rights, special freedoms, special immunities from consequences onto these groups. As they do so, people will feel less and less safe. And they will, and with the way that business has been done, throughout generation after generation after generation, involving governments, people are used to knowing the status quo, which is if you want more protection, you give up more freedoms. Just like if you're a person that hires bodyguards, if you want more bodyguards, you have to pay more money. Pretty simple. You don't have to have a business degree to understand that concept. Now, Why am I calling this a pathology? Well, it's because this actually follows a disease process. And that disease process is actually Stockholm Syndrome. Basically, we're all suffering from it. We are being abused, mistreated, tortured, and in some cases killed by the very thing that we think is protecting us. Sorry, had to go ahead and get myself another cancer stick. Now, I want you to think, what happens when crime rates drop below a certain threshold? Think back. Now, the older you are, the easier this is going to be. And if you're relatively young, you may actually have to go online and, do some research. Damn. But once crimes drop under a certain threshold, what ends up happening? The government ends up doing some bonehead bullshit that ends up resulting in crime rates going back up. They have to make sure that the demand is higher than the supply, or they risk losing business from us. Like in Germany, their crime rates were actually relatively low until recently, until the government imported criminals en masse and set them loose, and then started giving special considerations, special privileges to these people, allowing them to continually commit these crimes and to spread throughout the EU. So, I mean, that's just one instance of it, and it's one of the more extremes. Honestly, you don't really see governments importing criminals all that often. We have seen it in the past. Russia did it. But it's actually very rare. So how do we stop it? Well, a lot of people say, well, cast your vote. Well, the thing is that's only every few years. By that point, the damage has been done. And that's the same mentality of the cops will take care of it. I have spoken to multiple policemen. Obviously, they don't want their names put onto any of my videos, and I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna respect them on that. But the thing is, I only had one that I spoke to out of over 30. Only one actually thought that police prevent crimes. And that police officer was actually part of an anti-terror unit. All the rest, all the beat cops, hell, one of them in particular said that police don't prevent crimes. They don't. They just get there and figure out who did it and point the finger. That's all they do. They don't prevent crime. They react to crime. And to be fair, preventing crime is an insanely difficult thing. You don't want to end up in a situation, what was the movie There was a movie where they had a unit that used 3 psychic individuals to tell them who was going to commit a crime, and so the person would be arrested for the crime before they committed it. Yeah, let's not go down that path, guys. You think freedom of speech is fucked right now? Just wait until the government can arrest you saying, oh, well, we know you're going to commit a crime later, so we're going to convict you without there obviously being any evidence. We're going to convict you just because we said so. So let's not go that route. And I laugh about it, but the thing is I can guarantee you that a lot of these liberals would actually be for that if the government said that they had the capability of it. And it would be very easy for the government to go ahead and say, well, these crimes are going to be committed, and they're going to say, oh, there's going to be a rash of crimes. You think the government can't or wouldn't make that happen? Come on now. So, and I know that that's very tinfoil hat, but the thing is the government's already been shown in the past to have hired people to cause issues so that they could move in. We've already seen this. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. Am I saying that they would absolutely do this without fail? No. They're going to do their cost-benefit analysis. Is it worth it? Are they going to get enough business to make the financial cost worth it? And does it outweigh the risk of them getting blatantly caught? So, back to Stockholm Syndrome. When someone sits there and talks shit about your government, you know that little ping that you get? You know, that little ping of anger that you get, even though the person's not saying something necessarily wrong. In fact, it might be blatantly right. But you get that small ping. That's Stockholm Syndrome right there. That's the same type of feeling that the victim will get whenever someone says that the perpetrator did something wrong. So, given that, how long can you deny actually being a sufferer of Stockholm Syndrome? And the thing is this is pretty much worldwide. There are very, very few people who don't. And how did we get here? Well, through the slow boil method. Everyone's heard of it by this point, you know. How do you boil a frog? You heat up the water slowly, because if you heat it up too fast, the frog will hop out. Well, it's because of that we've gotten to this point. We've gotten used to the thought of having to have the government dictate our protection or have no protection. That is not the case. For example, let's go ahead and look at the Wild West, when the U.S. was still getting its sea legs. The Wild West. Everyone owned a gun, pretty much. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And the laws for using those guns were actually fairly lax. Did you have bandits? Did you have stupid shootouts based off of honor? Yes, of course you did. But the thing is people relatively felt safe. When did they stop feeling safe? Oh, when the sheriff would go ahead and tell people that they would be convicted, that they would be jailed for using their guns. That's when they stopped feeling safe. And so then all of it got on to the sheriff. And the sheriff all of a sudden had a lot of clout. Now I'm just using this as an example. But this goes back to medieval times. People were scared of the tax collector. Why? Because if you pissed off the tax collector, he would just collect more taxes. Or say he was. And if you didn't pay, you were arrested for not paying your taxes. Because there was no legal system. And at that point, what we call now civilians, back then it was serfs, were not allowed to really own weaponry. And even if they did have weaponry, if they were found walking around in armor, well, they'd be killed. Governments throughout history of any stripe have always used fear. And I can't help but remember a movie by the name of Dune. Very good movie. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend watching it. It is an older movie, so it's a little dated, but it's a good movie. Go ahead and watch it for the story. And also consider the time frame that it was in. The graphics were actually pretty good back at that point. But there's one scene that, well, I shouldn't say one scene, but one saying that pops into mind. Fear is the mind killer. Fear leads to destruction. Now, to a degree, I will agree with that. Fear does have a place in the human psyche. In fact, it's what drives our self-preservation instinct. However, it can be very easily manipulated, and it can be very easily misplaced. We're seeing this society-wide. Now I want you to think about it. What is the driving force behind people not coming forward and reporting their attackers? What is the driving force behind people seeing a crime being committed and them just continue to walk by and call the police to have the police come and mop up the mess? Fear. But what are they fearing? Are they fearing retaliation from the people that they would be interfering with? No. They fear that other people who aren't even directly involved using certain words in conjunction with their name. Now, what other point in history have we seen fear of words take place to the point to where it paralyzed people, where it made people willing to be extorted, willing to bend the knee? I can think of one at least, just off the top of my head, and that's the Salem witch hunts. There was no greater fear than someone calling you a witch, because it would destroy you. You would end up being killed, one way or the other. Well, we basically have the same situation now. Except instead of you being killed, now it's you being imprisoned. It's your business being ruined. It's you losing your job, your livelihood, which will eventually lead to your death. So, How long are the witch hunts going to go? How long are we going to allow this? When do we stop it? How many people have to have their lives absolutely destroyed because of the extortion of fear? How long are we going to allow ourselves to be victims? That's the $1,000,000 question, isn't it? Well, I don't like that saying, because technically nowadays $1,000,000 isn't exactly a whole hell of a lot of money. In fact, the government wouldn't even bat an eye at $1,000,000. So at this point, it's the $1,000,000,000,000 question. Because that's the absolute minimum that the government stands to gain from our fear. From our continued and growing fear. You have a bunch of politicians saying that, all these phobias are indicative of a failing society. And yes, it's true. It is indicative of a failing society. But a failing society is indicative of a failing government. Funny how you never hear someone say that. Funny how you never hear, even though I haven't even heard it on the alternative media. Even though it's a well-known fact. When a government fails, the society fails. So, taking a look at our governments, which failed first, society or the government? The answer is both failed simultaneously, because society failing led to the government failing. But society would not have failed if the government had actually upheld its end of the bargain. And I know that seems very circular, but it's actually not. The thing is these problems were created by our governments. Some of the problems were created with the best of intentions. They didn't think that these problems would actually be a thing. Some of them were done on purpose. But regardless of, what the intentions were, they are still problems. They do still need to be resolved, and the government is refusing to resolve them. In fact, they are placing the blame squarely on society. Sorry about that, but let's just go ahead and be honest here. With a situation like this, we only have a few courses of action. One is for society to band together and override the government and reset it back to a time when it worked. I don't see that happening. The other is to let it run its course and just let everything collapse and then rebuild from the rubble. That's seeming a lot more likely. The other is to get rid of the current government and build a government in the proper way. But our society at this point is in a state of failure. So at that point, we will build a failed government. straight out the gate. In all honesty, I don't see an easy answer. I don't see an easy or simple solution. But more importantly, I don't see a peaceful or positive solution at all. The closest that we could do, and I'm just going to use the US as a model here. The closest that we could do would be for the country to split into two different countries. One, populated by conservatives and so on and so forth, and the other populated by liberals. Now, I know that seems like a radical idea, but it's honestly the only way to where we can definitively find out who's right, who's wrong. But then it comes down to who gets what land. Because no one's going to want to take the shitty land, right? And you can't sit there and have different pockmarks of different countries dotted inside of each other. It just wouldn't work out. That would be an absolutely stupid idea. So, there's a bunch of logistical problems with it, but problems that can actually be solved. Honestly, that would be the only way that I could see any solution to this problem, but unfortunately, it wouldn't just be the US having to do that. It would have to be other countries as well doing it. Now, I know that people say that the US leads the world with their voting and all that sort of thing, but I don't fully buy that. Does it have an effect? Yeah. Because everyone likes to look at the US, but everyone likes to watch a circus. So, what are your thoughts? What do you think would be good solutions? And I'm talking about non-authoritarian ones. I'm talking about people just going their separate ways, basically. What do you think would be the best way of doing this? Let me know down in the comments. Go ahead, if you end up linking a reply video, I'll go ahead and watch the reply video, and as long as you're not sitting there and trying to propagandize, I'll go ahead and okay the link. I don't care what your reply video says other than that, but I'm just done at this point as far as people trying to post reply videos on my channel and then basically sitting there and saying that because I'm a white male, I don't get a say in the matter. As long as you're not doing shit like that, yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll let a reply video be posted on my videos. I'm not afraid of conversation. In fact, that's the point of my channel at this point. Hell, my channel was supposed to primarily be about video games, and here I am primarily about fucking politics. Hooray. But these are things that I do feel strongly about. And it's discussions that I really think need to be had. And I'm talking about taking off the kid gloves and not really giving a fuck about feelings. I care about what's happened in the past. How do we avoid it from happening again? How do we stop it from happening again currently? And what actions can logically be taken to correct the issues? So, have yourselves a nice day. I look forward to hearing your replies or reading them. And I'll talk to you all later.